They were told that blindfolds meant execution. In 1945, a 19-year-old Japanese nurse sat in an American military hospital in the New Mexico desert watching a white cloth come toward her face. She knew exactly what it meant. Blindfolds were for execution. The condemned received this one mercy before American bullets ended their lives. Emma Hayashi had been taught this truth as absolute as gravity. So when Dr. Robert Harrison stepped forward with that folded, white square in his hands, Emma knew her time had come. She would die here thousands of miles from home, blindfolded, like a criminal in a foreign land. But what Emma did not know, what she could not know, was that in the next 20 minutes, everything she believed about Americans, about freedom, about the value of human life itself, would be proven catastrophically wrong. This is the true story of how a simple surgical blindfold became the moment that changed not just one woman's life, but the lives of 17 young Japanese women and eventually generations of their descendants. It is a story about the most powerful weapon in the world, and it is not the atomic bomb. The desert heat pressed through canvas walls like a hand against skin. Emma sat in a metal surgical chair beneath a lamp that hung from the tent ceiling like a mechanical eye. Her fingers gripped the chair arms. The metal was warm. Everything in this place was warm except the knowledge settling cold in her chest. This is how I die, she thought, blindfolded like a criminal in a foreign desert. Dr. Harrison was 43 years old with gray threading through brown hair. He had served in North Africa. He had seen things that carved lines around his eyes. He wore the tired patience of a man who had sutured too many wounds and closed too many eyes that would never open again. But his hands were steady. His voice was gentle when he spoke through the interpreter. He says he needs to cover your eyes. The surgical light is very bright. It can damage your vision if you look directly at it. The cloth will protect your eyes while he works. The words came from Private Henry Kim, a Korean-American soldier from Los Angeles who knew some Japanese. He stood beside the doctor translating, carefully watching Emma's face as understanding bloomed there, like blood in water. Emma looked at the white cloth, clean, folded neatly. Standard military issue. She had been taught about this cloth, how it would be the last thing a prisoner felt before the end, how some prisoners wept when they saw it, how others faced it with stoic silence, how all of them knew what it meant. Behind her, 16 other Japanese women waited. Young women. Girls, really. The oldest was 19. The youngest was 17. They wore hospital gowns now instead of their torn military uniforms. They had been nurses with the Himiyuri Student Corps. High school students pressed into service when the Battle of Okinawa turned the island into hell. 6 weeks earlier, Emma had been in hell. The caves of Okinawa. 240 high school girls pressed into service as military nurses. They had spent 2 months in caves treating wounded Japanese soldiers in darkness. They had run out of medicine. They had run out of bandages. They had torn their own clothing to wrap wounds. They had held dying men who called for mothers they would never see again. They had breathed air thick with blood and gunpowder and the sweet rot of gangrene. And they had been taught every single day of their military service what Americans would do if they were captured. Americans are demons in human skin. They will torture you before they kill you. They will violate you in ways that destroy your spirit before they destroy your body. Death is preferable. Suicide is honorable. Capture is shame worse than any death. Emma had heard these lessons so many times they had become truth-worn smooth as prayer beads. But the demons had not tortured them. 3 weeks ago, they had emerged from the caves with their hands raised. Surrender was supposed to mean immediate execution. Instead, American soldiers had given them water, had loaded them onto a transport ship, had provided medical care during the 3-week journey across the Pacific Ocean. Navy medics had checked their health daily, had treated their wounds, had fed them rice and canned vegetables. Emma did not understand. The confusion only deepened when they landed in San Francisco. The city gleamed. Tall buildings touched the sky. The docks were organized and clean. Through the wire fence of the holding area, Emma could see markets overflowing with food. Produce stacked in pyramids of color. Meat hanging in shop windows. Bread in baskets. An abundance so vast it seemed obscene. Japan was starving. Tokyo was ashes. Her mother's last letter had described eating once a day. A handful of rice, pickled radish, nothing else. But America overflowed. They had been put on a train, 2 days through landscape that seemed to go on forever. California's golden hills, Arizona's red rock formations, New Mexico's endless sky. The windows showed a country untouched by war, ranches with fat cattle, fields growing crops, small towns with painted houses and flowering gardens. This was the enemy, this prosperous, peaceful, abundant nation. It made no sense. Fort Stanton sat in the southern New Mexico desert surrounded by mountains that turned purple at sunset. Adobe buildings clustered around parade grounds. American flags snapped in the dry wind. And everywhere American soldiers moved with the casual confidence of men who knew they were winning. But what had shocked Emma most was seeing German prisoners of war working in the gardens. Germans, enemy soldiers. But they were tending vegetables, not being tortured. They wore clean uniforms. They looked healthy. They moved without chains. One had even smiled at them when they arrived. If Germans were safe, Emma had thought, could they be safe too? Now sitting in this surgical chair with the white cloth approaching, that hope felt foolish. The medical tent was the largest structure Emma had ever been inside. Canvas walls stretched 20 feet high. Electric lights hung from the ceiling, powered by generators that hummed constantly in the background. The floor was wooden planking, swept clean. Metal tables lined the walls covered with bottles of clear liquid and stacks of white bandages. Surgical instruments gleamed in trays. Everything smelled of disinfectant, sharp, chemical, so different from the cave smell of blood and decay that Emma's nose had finally become accustomed to. Earlier that day, they had been examined. One by one, each woman had been checked by Dr. Harrison and his nurses. They had taken temperatures, checked blood pressure, looked at wounds, asked questions through Private Kim's careful translation. When did you last eat? Where does it hurt? Have you been wounded? The questions were clinical, professional, absent of cruelty or mockery. Lieutenant Sarah Wong, a Chinese-American nurse with dark hair pinned under her cap and a warm smile, had examined Emma personally. She had cleaned the burns on Emma's arms with gentle hands. Burns from a grenade explosion 2 weeks ago in the caves. Lieutenant Wong had applied ointment that cooled the fire in the damaged skin, had wrapped the burns in fresh white bandages, had spoken in English, the entire time her voice soft and reassuring, even though Emma could not understand the words. It was bewildering. Emma had been trained as a nurse. She understood the process of examination. She recognized professional competence when she saw it. But this went beyond competence. This was care, genuine care, for enemy prisoners. If you or your family members served in World War II, or if you remember this time in American history, I want to hear from you in the comments. Share your stories. They matter. They are part of what we are talking about today. Because what happened to Emma Hayashi in that medical tent in New Mexico, what happened with that white blindfold, is a story about the difference between propaganda and truth, between hatred and humanity, between the America enemies were told about and the America they actually encountered. And by the end of this story, you will understand why that difference matters more today than ever before. Emma was born in Tokyo in 1926. Her father was a clerk. Her mother took in sewing. They were not wealthy, but they were respectable. Emma had been a good student, smart, careful. She had trained as a nurse because she wanted to help people. That was before the war consumed everything. In 1944, when Emma was 18, the government began drafting high school girls for military service. The Himayuri Student Corps. They called it patriotic. They called it honorable. 240 students from Okinawa's best schools. Girls who should have been studying literature and mathematics were instead taught to hold amputated limbs and administer morphine to men screaming in agony. The Battle of Okinawa began in April 1945. It would become the bloodiest battle in the Pacific Theater. Over 200,000 dead. The Japanese military converted the southern caves into field hospitals. 240 teenage girls worked in darkness and filth, trying to save soldiers who arrived with wounds no 16-year-old should ever see. Emma held a dying man named Takeshi on his last night. He was 22, a farmer's son from Hokkaido. He had lost both legs below the knee. Infection had set in. There was no morphine left. He called for his mother. Over and over. Mama, Mama, please. Emma held his hand and lied to him. She told him his mother was coming. She told him everything would be fine. He died believing her. The next morning, the officer in charge gathered all the girls together. He told them the Americans were coming. He told them what Americans did to captured women. He gave them each a grenade. If capture was inevitable, they were to use it on themselves. Better to die with honor than live with shame. Emma had held that grenade in her hands. Cold metal. Heavy. She had thought, this is what my life has come to. 18 years old and holding the instrument of my own death. But when the Americans actually came crashing through the cave entrance with their rifles and their shouting, Emma found she could not do it. Her hand would not pull the pin. Her body refused to cooperate with the order to die. She raised her hands instead. 16 other girls did the same. They walked out of those caves into blinding sunlight, hands raised, waiting for the bullets that would end their shame. The bullets never came. An American soldier, young and maybe 20, had lowered his rifle. He had called for a medic. He had given Emma his canteen. The water was clean, cold. It tasted like life. On the transport ship crossing the Pacific, Emma had tried to make sense of it. Navy medics checked on them twice a day. A doctor examined the worst injuries. They were given clean clothes, fed 3 times a day. The food was simple but adequate. Rice, vegetables, sometimes fish. One of the medics, a man from Nebraska named Thompson, had shown Emma a photograph of his daughter. She was 17, the same age as some of the girls. He had smiled. She looks like you, he had said through a translator. Serious, smart, gonna be a doctor someday. Emma had not known what to say. This was the enemy, this demon in human skin. But he carried a photograph of his daughter and spoke of her with obvious pride and love. When the ship docked in San Francisco, they were processed through a holding facility. Emma saw the city through chain-link fence. Buildings so tall they seemed to touch clouds. Streets full of cars. People walking with purpose, but without fear. And the food. Dear God, the food. She had watched American workers unloading crates at the dock. One man had dropped a box. Oranges spilled across the concrete. Fresh oranges. Dozens of them. The man had cursed, picked up what he could carry, and left the rest, just left them there. Fruit rotting on the dock while Tokyo starved. The train journey to New Mexico took 2 days. Emma watched America pass by the windows. Endless. Vast. Untouched. She saw ranches with horses, fields planted with crops that stretched to the horizon, small towns with churches and schools and houses painted white, children playing in yards. Where was the war? Where was the destruction? Where was the suffering? It existed only on distant islands. In foreign lands, America itself remained pristine, abundant, safe. Fort Stanton appeared in the distance on a hot July afternoon. Adobe buildings shimmering in desert heat, mountains purple against an endless blue sky, the American flag hanging limp in still air. The truck stopped in front of a large canvas tent. Medical facility, the driver said. You will be examined, treated if necessary. Treated. That word again. Emma and the others were led inside. The tent was cool compared to the desert heat outside. Dim. It smelled of disinfectant and canvas. Lieutenant Wong greeted them with a smile. She spoke in English, but her tone was gentle, welcoming almost. One by one they were examined. When Emma's turn came, she sat on a metal stool while Lieutenant Wong checked her vital signs. The nurse's hands were careful, professional. She cleaned the burns on Emma's arms with something that stung, but then cooled. She applied fresh bandages. She made notes on a clipboard. Dr. Harrison came over. He was tall, taller than any Japanese man Emma had seen. He crouched down to examine Emma's right eye. She had been struck by debris during the grenade explosion. The eye was scratched, blurry. It had been getting worse. Dr. Harrison spoke to Lieutenant Wong. They conferred quietly. Then Private Kim translated. The doctor says your cornea is scratched. Without treatment, you may lose vision in that eye. He can perform a simple procedure to repair it, but he will need to protect your eyes from the surgical light. That is what the blindfold is for. Emma had nodded. She understood the words, but she did not believe them. Now sitting in the surgical chair, she watched Dr. Harrison approach with that white cloth. She could feel the eyes of 16 other women on her back. They were all thinking the same thing. This is it. This is how it ends. Emma had been a nurse. She had seen death. She had held dying men. She knew what death looked like. If she was going to die, she would die first. She would show the others how to face it with dignity. She would be the example they needed. She nodded once. Sharp, decisive, Dr. Harrison stepped forward. The white cloth came toward her face. Every muscle in Emma's body tensed. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird trying to escape a cage. Her breath came shallow and quick. This was it. The moment. The end of everything. All the propaganda had been true. The demons had simply been patient. They had fed her and clothed her and treated her wounds just to make this moment more cruel. The cloth touched her face, soft cotton against her cheeks, clean fabric that smelled faintly of soap. American soap, not the harsh carbolic acid they had used in the caves. This soap smelled gentle, almost sweet. It settled over her eyes like a whisper, like a mother's hand smoothing hair from a fevered forehead. Dr. Harrison's hands moved to tie the cloth at the back of her head. His touch was careful, not tight, not painful, just secure enough to hold the blindfold in place. Emma could feel the warmth of his fingers, human warmth, not the cold grip of an executioner. Darkness enveloped her. Emma waited for the gunshot. She counted her own heartbeats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Her chest felt tight. Her breathing sounded loud in her own ears. 6, 7, 8. Any moment now, any second. 9, 10. Instead of a gunshot, she heard the click of the surgical lamp being turned on. A mechanical sound, precise, followed by a low hum as the lamp warmed up. Not the crack of a rifle, not the bark of a pistol, just the mundane sound of medical equipment beginning its work. Then Dr. Harrison's voice, calm, steady, speaking to Lieutenant Wong in English. Medical terminology that Emma could not understand but recognized from her own training. Words like cornea and suture and irrigation. The sound of instruments being arranged on a metal tray. The clink of steel on steel. Something cool touched the skin around Emma's right eye. It smelled medicinal, sharp, like alcohol, but different. A numbing agent, local anesthetic to deaden the pain before the procedure began. He was actually going to operate. The blindfold was exactly what he had said it was. Protection from the surgical light, not preparation for execution, protection for healing. Emma's hands began to shake where they gripped the chair arms. Not from fear now, from something else. From the sheer overwhelming strangeness of being wrong about something she had been so certain of. From the collapse of certainty itself. Everything we were taught, she thought, everything they told us, it was a lie. The realization was more terrifying than the blindfold had been. Because if they had lied about this, what else had they lied about? If the blindfold did not mean death, if Americans were not demons, if capture did not mean torture and violation, then what else was false? What other truths were actually lies? The foundation of Emma's understanding of the world began to crack. Not all at once, not in a single catastrophic collapse, but slowly, like ice breaking up on a river in spring. Small cracks spreading, connecting, creating fissures that would eventually shatter everything. Dr. Harrison worked for 20 minutes. Emma felt pressure, but no pain. The anesthetic had done its job. She could feel him working. Careful movements, precise. He was cleaning the scratch on her cornea, removing debris, applying medication. Every action deliberate and controlled. She heard him speaking to Lieutenant Wong. His voice remained calm throughout. Never frustrated, never impatient. Just a professional doing his work with care and attention. Emma heard the clink of instruments on the metal tray. The sound of Lieutenant Wong responding to his instructions. The quiet efficiency of a surgical team that had worked together before and trusted each other completely. She felt the warmth of the surgical lamp even through the protective cloth covering her eyes. Steady heat, like afternoon sun on skin. Not painful, just present. And with each passing minute, Emma's understanding crumbled a little more. These were not demons. Demons did not work with such care. Demons did not speak in calm voices and use gentle hands. Demons did not spend 20 minutes repairing the cornea of an enemy prisoner who would probably never see them again. These were people, just people, doing their jobs, following their code, treating patients because that was what doctors and nurses did. When the procedure was finished, Dr. Harrison applied a bandage over Emma's right eye. Clean gauze held in place with medical tape. Then he reached for the blindfold. His hands moved to the knot at the back of Emma's head. He untied it carefully, slowly, giving her time to adjust as light began to seep in around the edges. He removed the blindfold completely. Emma blinked with her left eye. The tent came back into focus. Canvas walls, medical equipment. Lieutenant Wong standing nearby with a gentle smile. Dr. Harrison's face appeared slightly blurred through her unbandaged left eye. He was smiling too. A small professional smile of satisfaction at work done well. "Good," he said in English. Then in terrible broken Japanese that made Private Kim wince, he added, "You will see. I will heal." "Good." Lieutenant Wong helped Emma stand. Her legs shook so badly she could barely walk. The nurse's arm around her waist was steady, supportive. She guided Emma to a recovery cot on the other side of the tent. Emma sat down, then lay back, stared at the canvas ceiling with her one unbandaged eye. The blindfold had been for protecting her eyes, not for killing her. Protecting. The word felt foreign in her mind, impossible to attach to Americans, to enemies, to the monsters she had been taught to fear. But here she was, live, treated with a gentleness that made her want to weep. Dr. Harrison called the next woman forward. Sophie Tanaka came trembling like a leaf caught in wind. At 17, she was the youngest of the group, the smallest. Her whole body shook as she approached the surgical chair. When Dr. Harrison held up the white cloth and explained through Private Kim what it was, for Sophie made a small sound, like a wounded animal, like a child who had just realized she was lost. But she had watched Emma survive. She nodded. The cloth covered her eyes. Sophie held perfectly still. Emma could see tears leaking from beneath the blindfold running down the girl's temples into her hair. She waited for death, every muscle rigid, every breath held. 20 minutes later, she was being helped to a recovery cot beside Emma, her shoulder freshly bandaged where shrapnel had been removed. Her body whole, still breathing, still alive, still treated with care that defied everything she had been taught to expect. One by one, each woman who needed medical attention went through the same experience. Each one expected death when the blindfold covered their eyes. Each one received surgical treatment instead. Each one emerged alive and bandaged and more confused than they had ever been in their lives. By evening, 9 of the 17 had been treated. All 9 lay on recovery cots, wearing clean hospital gowns, their wounds professionally dressed. They had been given water in metal cups. Nurses promised that food would come soon. They lay in their cots and tried to process what had happened. Their bodies were in various states of physical recovery, but their minds were in shock, not from surgery or procedures, from the complete collapse of everything they thought they knew about their enemy. Emma stared at the canvas ceiling with her one unbandaged eye. She felt the world shifting beneath her like ground during an earthquake. The blindfold had been for protecting her eyes, not for killing her. Protecting. The word echoed in her mind like a bell that would not stop ringing. Americans, enemies, monsters. But monsters did not do this. Monsters did not heal. What did it mean when everything you believed turned out to be lies? Dinner arrived as the sun set over the New Mexico desert. Orderlies carried metal trays into the tent. The smell hit the women first. Warm food, real food, not the watery rice gruel they had survived on in the caves. Not the meager rations on the transport ship. Real food, cornbread, beans, carrots, small pieces of chicken, milk in glass bottles. An orderly set a tray on Sophie's lap. She stared at it like it might be a mirage, like it might disappear if she blinked. The cornbread gleamed golden yellow under the electric lights. Steam rose from the beans. The chicken looked real, actual meat. She had not seen meat in months. She picked up the cornbread. It was still warm. She broke off a small piece. The texture was different from Japanese bread. More crumbly, dense. She brought it to her mouth hesitantly. The taste exploded across her tongue. Sweet, buttery. The cornbread melted slightly as she chewed. She closed her eyes. Tears started immediately. She had not tasted sweet bread in over a year. The sensation was so overwhelming, she could not stop the tears from coming. They rolled down her cheeks while she chewed and swallowed and took another bite. Around her, the other women ate slowly, carefully. Their bodies had been starving for so long that sudden abundance felt dangerous. But the taste was undeniable. This was not prisoner food. This was good food. food made with care and attention. Emma ate her cornbread, slowly watching the others. Observing. That was what nurses did. Observe. Notice patterns. Draw conclusions from evidence. Catherine Sato sat on her cot with her arms crossed, glaring at her untouched tray. 18 years old, fierce with ideology. Her jaw was set in stubborn resistance. "This is poisoned," Catherine said, "or drugged. They want us compliant before whatever comes next." Emma looked at her from the neighboring cot. "If they wanted us dead, Catherine, we would be dead. If they wanted us drugged, we would be drugged. Eat." Catherine's jaw tightened. Her eyes flashed with anger. But after several long minutes of watching the others eat without dying or falling unconscious, she reached for the cornbread, took one small defiant bite. Her eyes widened slightly. She chewed slowly, swallowed, then despite herself, took another bite. The milk was cold, fresh. Sophie drank hers in small sips, savoring each one like it was liquid gold. Cold milk. When had she last had cold milk? She could not even remember. Before the war, certainly. Back when life was normal and milk was something you drank without thinking about it, without treasuring every drop. That night, lying in their cots with the lights dimmed but still glowing softly overhead, the women whispered to each other in Japanese. The American guards had moved to the far end of the tent out of earshot. Private Kim had gone to his quarters for the evening. The women could speak freely for the first time since arriving at Fort Stanton. But what was there to say? How could words capture the strangeness of this day? How could language contain the contradiction of everything they had experienced? Catherine's group of 5 women clustered in their corner, heads close together. Emma could hear Catherine's voice low and insistent. "This is a trick. They are being kind now to break our spirits later, to make us trust them so we lower our guard. This is psychological warfare. The Americans are masters of it." The women around Catherine murmured agreement, but their voices lacked conviction. Emma heard the doubt creeping in at the edges, saw it in the way they glanced at their empty dinner trays, tasted it in the lingering sweetness of cornbread on their tongues. Sophie's group on the other side of the tent whispered their own theories. Hannah, a girl of 18 with a bandaged leg, spoke quietly. "But they gave us medicine. They removed my infection. If they wanted us to suffer, why would they treat us?" Another voice answered, uncertain. "Maybe the suffering comes later. Maybe this is just the beginning." Sophie said something so quietly Emma almost missed it. "Maybe they are not monsters. Maybe what we were taught was wrong." The word hung in the air like smoke from a fire that could not be extinguished. Wrong. To say their teachers were wrong, to say their military officers were wrong, to say the emperor's ministers were wrong, to question the foundation upon which their entire understanding of the world had been built. The word was small, but it carried the weight of treason. Emma's group in the middle of the tent stayed mostly quiet, 8 women processing privately what could not yet be spoken aloud. Emma had no paper to write on, no journal to record her thoughts, but she cataloged everything in her mind the way a nurse catalogs symptoms. Observation, pattern recognition, diagnosis. The blindfold had not meant execution. The Americans had not tortured them. The food was good. The medical care was professional. The nurses were gentle. The soldiers were polite. Every single fact contradicted the propaganda. But propaganda was not easily discarded. It had been drilled into them day after day, year after year. It had become part of their identity, part of how they understood themselves and their place in the world. To abandon it now would mean admitting they had been lied to, systematically, deliberately, by people they had trusted. That was almost harder to accept than the cruelty would have been. Emma finally broke the silence. "Let us see what tomorrow brings. We are alive. That is something. That is more than we expected this morning." No one argued with her assessment, but no one slept deeply that night either. They lay in their cots, eyes open or closed, thinking thoughts they could not yet share. The foundation had cracked. Whether it would crumble completely or somehow hold together, that remained to be seen. Morning came with light filtering through the canvas walls and the sound of a bugle call echoing across the compound. Emma woke slowly, disoriented for a moment. Where was she? The tent, the hospital, Fort Stanton, New Mexico, America. Still alive. She had survived the night. The tent flap opened and Lieutenant Wong entered with two other nurses pushing a cart loaded with medical supplies. Morning rounds. The nurses moved efficiently from cot to cot, checking temperatures, examining bandages, making notes on clipboards. When Lieutenant Wong reached Emma's cot, she smiled. That warm, genuine smile that Emma still found difficult to reconcile with the image of demons she had been taught to fear. The nurse spoke in English, her tone gentle and encouraging, even though Emma could not understand the specific words. Lieutenant Wong carefully removed the bandage covering in Emma's right eye. The morning light hurt at first sharp and bright after a night of darkness. Emma blinked, squinted, turned her head away from the direct light streaming through the tent opening. Then her vision began to clear. Shapes came into focus. The canvas ceiling above her, the metal frame of the cot, Lieutenant Wong's face smiling down at her with professional satisfaction. Emma could see, not blurry, not scratched and painful, clear, sharp, better than it had been in weeks, maybe months. Lieutenant Wong held up two fingers in front of Emma's face. How many? Emma understood the test. It was universal, the same test nurses everywhere used to check visual acuity. Two, she said in Japanese. Lieutenant Wong's smile widened. Perfect. She applied a new lighter bandage over the eye. Just for today, she seemed to be saying, through gestures and tone, rest it, tomorrow we check again. Emma lay back on her cot, staring at the canvas ceiling, with both eyes now, though one was still bandaged. Dr. Harrison had saved her vision. An enemy doctor had repaired her eye with the same care and skill he would have given to one of his own soldiers. Why? The question consumed her. Not the how. She understood the medical procedure. She had been trained as a nurse. She knew how corneal repairs worked. The question was why. Why would an enemy invest time and resources and skill into healing someone who would provide no strategic value? Someone who might, if the war continued, return to Japan and eventually serve against them again. It made no strategic sense. Unless the strategy was not military. Unless the point was something else entirely. After morning rounds came breakfast. Emma had thought perhaps yesterday's abundance had been a special occasion. First day treatment for new arrivals, but the second morning brought the same lavish portions. Oatmeal with brown sugar, toast with butter and strawberry jam, small glasses of orange juice. Orange juice. Emma stared at the glass on her tray. In Japan, oranges were a luxury, expensive, rare. Juice was something you might have once a year if you were fortunate, and here it sat on a metal tray, offered casually to prisoners of war, as if it were no more valuable than water. Sophie had already finished her orange juice before Emma had even picked up her spoon. The youngest girl sat holding the empty glass, looking at it with an expression of wonder and confusion. Yesterday I discovered what sunshine tastes like, Sophie whispered to Emma. Today I am trying to remember how it felt so I can carry it with me forever. Emma picked up her own glass, brought it to her lips, tasted the sweet, tart brightness of orange juice for the first time in longer than she could remember. It was cold, fresh, perfectly balanced between sweet and acidic. It tasted like abundance, like a country so wealthy it could afford to give luxuries to its enemies. Around the tent, Emma observed the same pattern as yesterday. American soldiers eating identical meals. Doctors eating identical meals. Officers sitting with enlisted men talking and laughing casually. No rigid hierarchy separating ranks at mealtimes. In the Japanese military, officers ate first and best. Soldiers received what remained. Nurses like Emma had survived on scraps. The hierarchy was absolute and unquestionable, but here everyone ate the same food, at the same time. The general and the private received identical portions. The distinction existed in rank and responsibility, but not in basic human dignity or sustenance. The observation troubled Emma in ways she could not fully articulate. It suggested a fundamentally different understanding of human worth, a different philosophy about what people deserved simply by virtue of being human. After breakfast, Lieutenant Wong led the women to shower facilities. She demonstrated how the handles worked. Hot water from one tap, cold water from another. They could be mixed to achieve comfortable temperature. Soap was provided in bars. Towels were stacked on shelves. Shampoo came in bottles. The women took turns modest and careful. They had not bathed properly in months. In the caves, water had been for drinking, not washing. They had become accustomed to the smell of their own bodies, to dirt ground into skin, to hair matted and dull. Sophie went third. She stepped into the shower stall with hesitation, as if entering a sacred space she might defile. She turned the hot water handle. Water cascaded from the shower head mounted in the ceiling. Warm at first, then hot, as Sophie adjusted the temperature. Steam began to rise, filling the small stall with moist heat. Sophie stood under the stream and wept. Emma, waiting her turn, could hear the girl's quiet sobs mixing with the sound of running water. Sophie was not crying from sadness. She was crying from the overwhelming sensation of being warm, of being clean, of hot water soaking into muscles that had been cold and cramped for so long. When Sophie emerged 15 minutes later, wrapped in a clean white towel, she looked younger than her 17 years. The cave dirt was gone. The smell of death and fear was gone. She looked like the schoolgirl she had been before war consumed her childhood. Emma's turn came. She stepped into the still steaming stall and turned on the water. Let it run over her scarred body, over burns that were healing, over skin stretched thin from malnutrition, over muscles weakened by months of inadequate food and constant stress. The hot water felt like forgiveness. Emma did not know for what, but standing under that stream of clean, hot, abundant water, she felt something inside her begin to soften. Some hard knot of tension she had been carrying for months, maybe years, started to dissolve. She scrubbed her skin with the soap. It smelled like flowers, not the harsh carbolic they had used in military hospitals, not the chemical burn of disinfectant, just flowers, simple and clean and gentle. Catherine showered last. She was quick, efficient. I will not enjoy their luxuries, she muttered as she entered the stall. But Emma noticed that Catherine stayed under the water 30 seconds longer than the previous day, that she took the time to wash her hair twice instead of once, that when she emerged, her face held an expression of relief despite the hard set of her jaw. Resistance was crumbling, drop by drop, moment by moment, like water wearing away stone. By mid-morning, the women were clean-fed and resting. Some helped fold bandages under Lieutenant Wong's supervision, light work, recovery work. They were being treated as patients who could contribute, not as prisoners forced into labor. And then Corporal Daniel Cooper arrived. He walked into the medical tent around 10 o'clock with his cowboy hat in his hands, having been reminded by Lieutenant Wong to remove it indoors. He was 25 years old with an easy smile and the relaxed posture that seemed characteristic of Americans. Chinese-American Private Kim had mentioned, from Houston, Texas, third generation. His family had been in America for 70 years. Good morning, ladies, he said in English. Then in the most atrocious Japanese Emma had ever heard, he added, You learn English today? His pronunciation was so bad that several women actually smiled despite themselves. The tones were wrong. The grammar was backwards. But his face was friendly, non-threatening. He pulled up a chair, turned it around backwards in that casual American way, and sat facing them. Before we continue with Emma's story, I want to ask you something. Many of you watching this remember World War II. Maybe you served. Maybe your father or grandfather served. Maybe you remember what it was like when American values meant something clear and unshakable. Freedom, mercy. The cowboy code that said you treat people right regardless of who they are. If this story is resonating with you, if you are recognizing something important here, do me a favor. Leave a comment sharing what American value you think is most important to preserve today. I read every single comment. Your perspective matters. Your memories matter. Now let us get back to Fort Stanton, because Corporal Cooper was about to teach Emma something that would change her understanding of America forever. Catherine spoke up sharply before Cooper could continue. Why would we need English? The war will end soon. We will go home. Corporal Cooper's smile faded slightly. His expression became more serious. He spoke in English, and Private Kim translated carefully. War is ending all right, but not the way you think. Japan will lose, occupation will come. English will help you survive what comes next. The words landed like stones thrown into still water. Ripples of shock spreading outward. Japan will lose. They knew it intellectually. After Okinawa fell after the bombing raids destroyed Tokyo after the Navy was decimated. But hearing it stated so casually, so certainly, by the enemy, it made the reality impossible to deny. We do not need American language, Catherine said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. Corporal Cooper nodded slowly as if he understood what she was really saying, what she was really afraid of. I understand, but while you are here, learning some English cannot hurt. Just basics. Hello? Thank you. Please. These words might help you someday. Emma surprised herself by speaking. I will learn. Every head turned toward her. Catherine stared with open betrayal in her eyes. Emma, oh mama, met her gaze steadily. He is right. If we survive, English may be useful. We are here. We have time. What harm can it do? But Emma's internal reasoning went deeper than practicality. She was thinking like a nurse again, gathering information, building understanding. If she was going to figure out who these Americans really were, she needed to understand their language, their words, their way of expressing thought. Corporal Cooper's smile returned. Good. We start simple. Hello? Hello, Emma repeated. Her tongue struggled with the unfamiliar sound. The L was difficult. Japanese had no L sound, only R. But she tried, shaped her mouth carefully, listened to the difference between her pronunciation and his. Sophie joined in. Hello. Her voice was softer, but her pronunciation was better. Younger tongues adapted faster, more flexible. One by one, other women tried the word. Tentative, uncertain, but curious despite themselves. Only Catherine and her core group of 4 refused. They sat with arms crossed, silent resistance written in every line of their bodies. Corporal Cooper did not push. He just smiled and continued teaching those who were willing. Thank you. Please. How are you? Basic phrases. Building blocks of communication. Sergeant Thomas Garcia appeared in the doorway just as the English lesson was concluding. 30 years old, Mexican-American, third-generation Texan. His family had ranched in Texas for decades. He carried himself with quiet authority and spoke with an accent that blended Spanish vowels with Texas drawl. Morning, ladies, he said, nodding respectfully. Through Private Kim's translation, he asked if they needed anything. Extra blankets, different food, books maybe. Books. When had any of them last read something other than military manuals? When had there been time for stories or poetry or anything beyond survival? Do you have Japanese books? Emma asked. Garcia shook his head. No, ma'am, but we have English books, picture books maybe, to help with learning. That would be acceptable, Emma said. Before Garcia could leave, Emma asked the question that had been burning in her chest since the blindfold moment. The question she needed answered more than she needed food or water or medicine. Why are you kind to us? Garcia paused, turned back. His face became serious. He looked at Emma directly, meeting her eyes the way he might meet the eyes of an equal, of a person deserving respect. He spoke slowly and Private Kim translated with equal care. Because you are patients here. Because you are young women far from home. Because my mother taught me that kindness is not weakness. It is strength. And because this is what Americans do. We fight hard. But when the fighting stops, we show mercy. The answer was so simple, so straightforward. No political speeches, no propaganda, just a man explaining his values as if they were self-evident truths that required no justification. Catherine snorted from her corner. Propaganda. You think we believe this? Garcia looked at her, not angry, not defensive, just sad, like a teacher disappointed that a student had missed an important lesson. I do not need you to believe anything, miss, but you will see. Time will show you. He left then, his boots making soft sounds on the wooden floor. Emma watched him go, her mind working, analyzing, comparing. The cowboy code, he had said. Americans have their own code, their own understanding of honor. The thought would not leave her alone for the rest of the day. 3 days later, on July 28th, the smell started drifting through Fort Stanton around mid-morning. Smoke, meat, spices, something rich and deep and almost overwhelming in its intensity. Sergeant Garcia was organizing a cookout behind the medical tent. He had been smoking brisket since the night before. 12 hours, someone said. Texas style, low and slow. By late afternoon, the smell had become impossible to ignore. It permeated everything. The tent, the air, their clothes. Emma's mouth watered despite herself. She had not smelled meat cooking in longer than she could remember. As the sun began its descent toward the purple mountains painting the desert in shades of orange and gold, Garcia began setting up tables outside. He invited everyone: guards, medical staff, recovering patients, the German prisoners of war from their section of the camp, and the 17 Japanese women. "Y'all are gonna taste real American cooking," Garcia announced through Private Kim's translation. "This here is how we show respect in Texas. We share food. We break bread together." Emma watched Garcia pull the brisket from the smoker. It was a large metal box that had been breathing smoke all day. When he opened it, more smoke billowed out, carrying that intoxicating smell of wood and meat and thyme. The brisket itself looked almost black on the outside. The bark, Garcia called it. The crust formed by hours of smoke and heat. But when he sliced into it with a long knife, the inside was deep pink, almost red. "A smoke ring," Garcia explained to someone standing nearby. "Sign of proper smoking." The meat pulled apart at the lightest touch of the knife. Juice ran onto the cutting board. Garcia sliced piece after piece, arranging them on large platters. The spread he laid out seemed impossible. Brisket, coleslaw made with cabbage and carrots in a creamy dressing, more cornbread, beans cooked with molasses and bacon, sweet tea in large pitchers so sweet it made teeth ache just looking at it. Emma stared at the food. This was enemy cuisine, enemy culture. To eat it felt like acceptance, like surrender in a way that raising her hands in the cave had not been. But the smell, dear God, the smell. She would be first, again. If there was danger in eating, let her face it. She had been first with the blindfold. She would be first with this too. Emma took a plate, moved down the table. Garcia himself served her a generous portion of brisket, smiled as he did so. Real smile. Warm. She sat at one of the long tables set up in the desert evening. The air was cooling now, pleasant. The mountains were turning that deep purple that gave them their beauty. Stars were beginning to appear in a sky that seemed impossibly vast. Emma looked at the brisket on her plate, cut a small piece with her fork, brought it to her mouth. The taste was overwhelming. Smoke, salt, spice, sweetness. All of it layered together in perfect balance. The meat melted on her tongue, literally melted. The fat carried flavors she had no names for. Paprika, she thought. Garlic, brown sugar, black pepper, but also something else. Something that came from 12 hours of patient tending, of wood smoke slowly penetrating every fiber of meat. The texture was unlike anything she had experienced. So tender it barely required chewing. It fell apart in her mouth, released its flavors in waves. First smoke, then spice, then sweetness, then a savory depth that seemed to go on forever. Emma closed her eyes. This was not just food. This was care made edible. Someone had tended this meat for 12 hours, had woken in the night to check the temperature, had added wood at precise intervals, had maintained consistent heat, had waited with patience born of tradition and respect for craft. This was love, in a form she had not expected, but unmistakable nonetheless. Sophie took a bite of her brisket, and tears started flowing immediately. She chewed slowly, swallowed, and took another bite, still crying, unable to stop. Catherine, who had declared she would not participate in this American propaganda event, sat at the far end of a table with her arms crossed and her plate empty. But Emma watched, and Emma saw. After 15 minutes of watching others eat, Catherine reached for a piece of brisket. Just one piece, defiant, proving she could resist even while tasting. She took a bite. Her eyes widened. Her jaw worked slowly, carefully, as if trying to decode what her taste buds were reporting. She swallowed, stared at the meat on her plate, then took another bite, resistance crumbling, one bite at a time. Garcia sat down across from Emma. He had his own plate now loaded with food. He ate with obvious enjoyment, comfortable and relaxed. Through Private Kim, he began to explain. In Texas, we take barbecue seriously. It is not just food, it is tradition. My grandfather taught my father. My father taught me. You cook low and slow. You do not rush. Good things take time. Emma understood that principle. Nursing was the same. Healing could not be rushed. The body needed time, care, patience. Good outcomes required all three. Why share this with us? Emma asked. We are your enemies, Garcia smiled. Were. Past tense. War is ending, and even during war we believe in something. We call it the cowboy code. Cowboy code. Emma did not know the English word for cowboy. Garcia explained through Kim, the code of the West, how cowboys lived, how ranchers survived in hard country, the rules that made civilization possible in wild places, hard work, honesty, loyalty to your outfit, protecting those weaker than you, sharing what you have, keeping your word, meeting eyes when you talk. A man's honor is his word. A woman's strength is her character. Catherine had been listening from her end of the table. She looked up sharply. That sounds like Bushido, she said. Our way of the warrior. Honor, duty, loyalty. Garcia nodded slowly. Same idea, different language. Honor is honor. Does not matter if you say it in English or Japanese or Spanish. It is the same thing. Treating people right, doing your duty, protecting what matters. Something shifted in Emma's chest at those words. Americans had honor, their own version, their own understanding of what it meant to live well and treat others with dignity. It was not the absence of honor that made them different from Japan. It was a different expression of the same fundamental values. Bushido had taught Emma to die for the emperor, to value death over dishonor, to see individual life as less important than collective purpose. The cowboy code taught protecting the weak, sharing abundance, keeping your word, meeting eyes when you speak. It valued life, individual life, human dignity. Both systems were about honor, but the outcomes were radically different. One led to teenage girls holding grenades in dark caves, preparing to end their own lives rather than face capture. The other led to enemy prisoners eating Texas brisket under New Mexico stars while their former enemies explained the importance of cooking meat slowly and treating people right. Emma sat there with that plate of food surrounded by enemies who were becoming something else, and understood something profound. Culture was not the enemy. Values were not the enemy. Fear was the enemy. Ignorance was the enemy. Lies were the enemy, and she had been drowning in lies her entire life. That night, Emma could not sleep. She lay in her cot staring at the canvas ceiling, her mind replaying the conversation with Garcia over and over. The cowboy code, honor is honor, treating people right. She took out the small notebook that Private Gonzalez had given her the day before. Plain paper, a pencil, simple tools, but they felt precious in her hands. She wrote by the dim light of the tense night lamps. The blindfold was supposed to be the last thing I saw before execution. Instead, it was the first moment of my true education. Blinded, I could not see. I could only feel careful hands and hear gentle voice and experience intent to heal. We were taught Americans were demons, but demons do not save your eyesight. Demons do not feed you when you are starving. If they are demons, what does that make our leaders who sent us to die? She did not show anyone what she wrote. Some truths were too dangerous, even here, even now. July 30th arrived with the same morning routine. Bugle call, light through canvas, Lieutenant Wong's rounds, breakfast with orange juice and toast. The patterns were becoming familiar, almost comfortable. And then the Red Cross workers arrived. They came mid-morning with canvas bags slung over their shoulders. Mail, they announced, letters from Japan, messages that had made the long, difficult journey across a war-torn world. The tent fell silent. Every woman froze. Letters from home meant news. News could be good or devastating. There was no way to know until the envelope was opened. The Red Cross worker began calling names. Some women received letters, some did not. The randomness of it felt cruel. Emma Hayashi. Emma's hands trembled as she took the thin envelope. The paper was so delicate it seemed it might dissolve at her touch. Her mother's handwriting. Akiko Hayashi. Careful characters in the old-fashioned style. The postmark said May 1945. 3 months ago, a lifetime ago. Emma returned to her cot, sat down, stared at the envelope for a long moment before opening it. The letter inside was a single page, thin paper that had been folded and refolded many times as if her mother had read it over and over before finally sending it. My dearest daughter, the city is gone. The fire bombings took everything. Our home is ash. We live in a shelter now with 30 other families. Crowded but safe from the raids. Food is scarce. We eat once per day, a handful of rice, pickled vegetables when we can get them. Your father works clearing rubble for a few grams of rice per day. Many people have died from hunger. We are surviving. Your brother Kenji is missing. Last we heard he was in the Philippines. No word since January. We believe he is dead. We pray for his spirit. We think of you every day. We pray you found an honorable end and did not suffer. May your spirit rest in peace. Emma read the letter 3 times. Each time the words hit harder. Her mother thought she was dead, had already mourned her, had already lit incense for her spirit at the family shrine, had already performed the rituals for the dead. And Emma was here, eating 3 meals a day, sleeping in a clean bed, receiving medical treatment her family could never afford, gaining weight while they starved. The guilt was crushing. Sophie received a letter too, from her little sister Yuki, 10 years old. The handwriting was large and uncertain. Childish mistakes in the characters. Big sister, the teachers told us you are a hero. They said you died bravely for the emperor. I miss you so much. I cry at night, but mother says I must be strong like you. I am hungry all the time. We eat very little. Mother says we must be brave. I try to be brave like you, but it is hard. I wish you were here. I love you. Yuki, Sophie's hands shook as she held the letter. Tears fell onto the paper, smearing the ink her sister had so carefully written. Her little sister thought she was dead. Her little sister was starving, and Sophie was here. Safe, fed, healing. What kind of sister was she? Catherine received no letter. She sat on her cot with her arms wrapped around her knees, watching the others read their mail. Her entire family had been in Okinawa. Parents, 2 younger brothers, 1 older sister, all dead. Probably killed in the final days of the battle. Probably buried in mass graves or left unburied in the chaos. No one to write letters. No one to mourn her. No one waiting for her return. She had nothing. No one. Nothing to go back to. That evening dinner arrived as usual. The orderlies brought metal trays laden with food. The smell should have been comforting by now. Familiar. But tonight it felt obscene. Pot roast. Mashed potatoes with butter and cream. Green beans cooked with bacon. Fresh bread. Milk. Emma stared at her tray. The pot roast steamed, releasing the scent of slow-cooked beef and rich gravy. The potatoes were fluffy and white, topped with a pat of melting butter. The green beans glistened with bacon fat. She could not eat. Her mother was eating once a day, a handful of rice, maybe some pickled vegetables if they were fortunate. And Emma had pot roast. The contrast was unbearable. She tried to pick up her fork. Her hand would not move. The weight of the guilt was physical, pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Around her, other women struggled with the same moral calculus. Some tried to eat. Some cried quietly into their hands. Some just stared at the abundance before them and wondered how they could ever explain this to their families. Dr. Harrison entered the tent to check on his patients. He noticed immediately the barely touched trays, the tears, the tension radiating from every woman. He asked Private Kim what was wrong. Kim explained quietly. Letters from home, families starving in Japan. The women feel guilty for being well-fed while their loved ones suffer. Harrison's face fell. The expression was genuine, unguarded. Emma watched him carefully, her nurse's training automatically cataloging the micro-expressions. Sadness, empathy, helplessness. These were not the expressions of a man performing compassion. These were real emotions from someone who genuinely cared. I am sorry, Harrison said through Kim's translation. War is cruel to everyone. I wish your families had enough to eat. I wish no one was hungry anywhere. That was when Catherine exploded. She stood abruptly, her chair scraped against the wooden floor. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing hard, fists clenched at her sides. Then she picked up her tray and threw it across the tent. Metal clattered against canvas. Pot roast splattered against the floor. Gravy sprayed across several feet of wooden planking. Potatoes scattered. The milk bottle shattered white liquid, spreading in a pool. Do not dare pity us, Catherine screamed in Japanese. Kim translated rapidly, his voice shaking slightly. Your bombs did this. Your fire raids burned our cities. Your blockade starved our people. You did this. We should be dead. At least then we would have honor. Her voice cracked on the last word. The fury drained out of her, suddenly replaced by something rawer. Grief, despair, the bottomless ache of losing everything. The tent fell absolutely silent. Every American, every Japanese woman, frozen. Catherine stood there shaking, tears streaming down her face, fists still clenched but no longer in anger, in anguish. Dr. Harrison did not argue, did not defend American strategy or justify the bombing campaigns or explain military necessity. He just looked at Catherine with those tired eyes and nodded slowly. "You are right," he said through Kim. "War is cruel. I am sorry." His acceptance of her blame was more devastating than any counter-argument could have been. Catherine had been prepared for defensiveness, for justification, for the enemy to prove themselves as monstrous as she needed them to be. Instead, he agreed with her, acknowledged her pain, apologized for it. She stood there for a moment longer, fists slowly unclenching before turning and walking out of the tent into the New Mexico evening. Emma waited 15 minutes before following. She found Catherine sitting against the side of a building, knees pulled to her chest, shoulders shaking with sobs. In the darkness, with her face hidden against her knees, Catherine looked impossibly young. Not 18, more like 12. A child who had lost everything and did not know how to carry that loss. Emma sat down beside her, said nothing, just presence. Sometimes that was all a nurse could offer, presence in the face of suffering. After a long time, Catherine spoke. Her voice was rough from crying. "My parents are dead. My brothers are dead. My sister is dead. My city is ash. I have nothing left." "You have us," Emma said quietly. "Do I?" Catherine turned to look at her. "You are learning English." Sophie smiles at the Americans. Everyone is forgetting. Forgetting duty, forgetting honor, forgetting who we are. "Maybe we are remembering who we are," Emma said. "Underneath the propaganda, underneath the training. Maybe we are finding what was there before the war took it." Catherine shook her head. "I do not know who that person is. I have been a soldier since I was 16. The emperor's subject, the nation's servant. If I stop being that, what am I?" "A person," Emma said. "Just a person, with the right to survive. Survival is not enough, then find something else. But first you have to survive." They sat in silence. Above them, the New Mexico sky blazed with stars. More stars than Emma had ever seen in Japan. The desert air was so clear, so unpolluted by smoke and war, that the Milky Way stretched like a river of light across the infinite darkness. Beauty existing despite war. The world continuing despite human suffering. Catherine finally spoke again. "We were wrong about the blindfold. I thought it meant death. It meant healing." Emma nodded. "Yes. What else are we wrong about?" The question hung in the air between them. Emma had too many answers. They had been wrong about everything: the Americans, the war, the nature of honor, maybe even the divinity of the emperor himself. But to say that aloud felt like treason. Even here, even now. "I do not know," Emma lied. "But we are learning." August 6, 1945, arrived with a strange tension in the air. The American soldiers were different that day. Excited, worried, tense. All at once, they gathered around radios, spoke in urgent whispers, looked at the Japanese women with something that resembled pity. Something big was coming. Private Kim entered the medical tent that afternoon. His face was gray, drawn. He looked like a man who had just received devastating news and did not know how to process it. He gathered the 17 Japanese women together, spoke in Japanese, his voice shaking. "This morning, America dropped a new kind of bomb on Hiroshima, a single bomb. It destroyed the entire city. 70,000 people dead instantly. Maybe 140,000 total when you count those who will die from injuries and radiation." The words made no sense. One bomb, one city, impossible. Bombs destroyed buildings, blocks at most, not entire cities. "It is called an atomic bomb," Kim continued. He looked like he might be sick. "Power of the sun, something new. Nothing has ever been this destructive before." Sophie began crying immediately. "My aunt lived in Hiroshima. My cousin, her husband, their children. "I am sorry," Kim said. He looked like he wanted to cry too. Corporal Cooper arrived with newspapers, American newspapers with photographs. A mushroom cloud rising miles into the sky, taller than mountains, wider than cities, devastation visible even from the air. Flat earth where buildings had stood. Shadows burned into concrete where people had been vaporized. "You are lying," Catherine said. "This is propaganda. To break our spirits." Cooper shook his head sadly. "I wish I was lying." Dr. Harrison came to check on them personally that evening. His face was haggard. He looked like he had not slept, like the weight of this new weapon pressed on him physically. "I am a doctor," he said through Kim's translation. "I save lives. This weapon, it is against everything I believe, but it will end the war. In the long run, it will save more lives than it takes. American lives, Japanese lives, all lives." But he did not sound convinced of his own words. He sounded like a man trying to justify something that could not be justified, trying to find meaning in devastation beyond comprehension. 3 days later, August 9th, the news came of a second bomb. Nagasaki, another city erased, another 100,000 dead, maybe more. Japan could not continue, could not fight, could not resist the power of the sun turned into a weapon. The war was over. It just had not officially ended yet. August 15th. The announcement came that the emperor would speak. For the first time in history, the divine voice would be broadcast to the people. Every Japanese prisoner of war at Fort Stanton was gathered to hear it. The radio crackled with static. Then the voice came, high-pitched, formal, using archaic court Japanese that was barely comprehensible even to educated ears. "The war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage. The enemy has begun to employ a new and most cruel bomb. We have resolved to endure the unendurable and suffer what is insufferable." The emperor was surrendering. The divine was admitting defeat. Catherine collapsed, literally fell to her knees. A wail tore from her throat. Animal, broken, the sound of a soul shattering. She had nothing left. No family, no home, no purpose, and now no nation. The emperor himself, the living God, admitted that Japan had lost. It was over. Other women cried. Some sat in silent shock. Some held each other. Sophie curled into a ball, shaking with sobs. Emma felt grief, yes, for her country, for her people, for the dead and the dying, and those who would suffer in the aftermath. But she also felt something else, something she was almost ashamed to acknowledge. Relief. The war was over. No more killing, no more dying, no more fighting, no more young women in caves holding grenades and preparing to end their own lives. Over. Dr. Harrison came to them that evening. He brought comfort food, chicken soup, soft bread, hot tea. He sat with them, did not speak, did not try to offer words that would be meaningless, just presence, witness to their grief. Emma asked through Kim, "Why do you care? The war is over. We are no longer relevant." Harrison looked at her with those tired, kind eyes. "The war is over. You are not my enemies anymore. You are my patients, and my patients matter to me. Always." Mid-September brought new announcements. All civilian prisoners of war would be repatriated. Ships were being prepared. Processing would begin in October. Within weeks, they would leave Fort Stanton and return to Japan. The words should have brought joy. Going home, seeing family, returning to their own country. Instead, Emma felt dread. She was healthy now, completely recovered. Her eye was healed better than it had been before the injury. Her burns were scarred but no longer painful. She had gained 15 pounds. Her face had filled out. Her skin glowed with health. How could she return to Tokyo looking like this? Her mother lived in a shelter with 30 other families. Her father worked clearing rubble for a few grams of rice per day. And Emma would arrive healthy, well-fed, clearly cared for by the enemy. The shame would be unbearable. October came with cooler nights and the slow turning of leaves on the cottonwood trees scattered around Fort Stanton. Departure day arrived with clear blue squish and that distinctive New Mexico light that made everything seem sharp and immediate. The women boarded a truck that would take them to the train station. Before they left, there were goodbyes. Corporal Cooper gave each woman a small gift. For Emma, he gave photographs he had taken of Fort Stanton, his grandmother's cornbread recipe written out in careful English, a small prayer written in Japanese characters. His message delivered through Kim was simple. You are a nurse. You save lives. Remember that. Your life has value. Use it to help others. Emma could not speak. She just nodded and held the papers to her chest. Dr. Harrison shook each woman's hand. When he reached Emma, he looked at her right eye, the one he had saved. You see clearly now. Use that sight well. I will. Amma managed to say. Thank you for giving it to me. It was always yours. Harrison smiled. I just helped you keep it. Lieutenant Wong cried while hugging Sophie. Write to me, she made Sophie promise. Promise you will write. Sophie promised through her own tears. Sergeant Garcia stood with his hat in his hands. To each woman he said, Vaya con Dios, go with God. To Emma specifically he added, remember the cowboy code. Honor is not in dying. Honor is in living well, in protecting others, in being true to your word. I will remember, Emma said, all of it, always. The train pulled away from Fort Stanton. Emma looked back at the compound. That place had been her prison, but it had also been her sanctuary, her education, her transformation. Leaving felt wrong, like abandoning safety for danger instead of the other way around. Before we continue with Emma's journey home, I need you to understand something. What happened at Fort Stanton was not unique. There were camps across America where enemy prisoners were treated with dignity, where the cowboy code and American values meant something real, where mercy was shown even in the midst of war. If this story is moving you, if you are recognizing something important about what America can be at its best, I need you to subscribe to this channel. Not for me, for the stories. Because understanding what actually happened in our history, not what we were told happened, but what really happened, that understanding is the antidote to hatred. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment with your own memories or your family's stories. These connections matter. These memories matter. Now let us follow Emma back to Japan, because what she had to face there, the price she would pay for the crime of surviving, that is where the true test of everything she learned would begin. The ship journey back to Japan took 3 weeks. The vessel was crowded with repatriating Japanese civilians and prisoners of war. Emma and the other 16 women kept to themselves mostly. They did not speak about Fort Stanton, did not mention American kindness, did not share what they had learned. The other prisoners would not understand, would call them traitors, collaborators, women who had somehow dishonored themselves by surviving in captivity. So they stayed quiet and watched Japan's coast appear on the horizon. It should have felt like homecoming. Instead, it felt foreign. From the ship, Emma could see the devastation. Cities still smoking, infrastructure destroyed. The harbor at Yokohama was controlled by American forces now. G is everywhere. Jeeps, American flags flying over Japanese soil. Japan had not just lost the war. Japan had been conquered, occupied. The divine nation was now under foreign control. They were processed through repatriation centers, given papers, told they were free to return to their families. Free. The word felt hollow. They had been free at Fort Stanton, fed, cared for, safe. Now they were free to return to ruins and starvation. The 17 women separated at Tokyo Station. They exchanged addresses, promised to stay in touch, hugged goodbye with tears streaming down their faces. They had survived together. But now each had to face her own homecoming alone. Emma's journey to her old neighborhood took 2 days. The trains were damaged. The tracks were broken. Distance that would have taken hours before the war took 2 days now. Through the window, she saw the complete devastation. Entire neighborhoods gone. Just foundations and rubble. People living in shacks made of scrap metal and cardboard. Children with hollow eyes begging at train stations. Her neighborhood was unrecognizable. The house where she had grown up was gone, burned to ash in the fire bombings. In its place stood a small wooden shack that her family shared with 2 other families. 12 people living in a space meant for 3. Emma knocked on the door. Her hand shook. Her mother answered. Emma barely recognized Akiko Hayashi. Her mother had aged 20 years in the 6 months since Emma had last seen her. Thin, skeletal, cheeks hollow, eyes sunken deep in her skull, hair completely gray. She stared at Emma, just stared, then whispered, Emma, but you are dead. They told us you died in Okinawa. We held services for your spirit. I survived, Mother. The Americans captured me. They kept me in a hospital. They treated my wounds. And now I am home. Her mother looked at her, really looked, took in Emma's healthy appearance, her clean clothes provided by the Red Cross, her filled-out face, her clear eyes glowing with health, her mother's eyes filled with tears. You look well. Those three words carried a universe of meaning: accusation, relief, confusion, pain, betrayal. You look well while we suffered, while your brother died, while we starved, while the city burned, while everything we knew turned to ash. You look well. They stood in the doorway. Between them was a gulf of experience that could not be bridged with words. Emma had seen things her mother could never understand. Her mother had endured things Emma had been spared. They reached for each other, embraced. But it was awkward, uncertain. Two strangers who shared blood but no longer shared understanding. Emma could never tell her family the full truth about Fort Stanton, about blindfolds that meant healing instead of death, about American doctors who saved enemy eyesight, about hot showers and orange juice and Texas barbecue and the cowboy code. They would not understand, could not understand. She was trapped between two worlds. She belonged fully to neither. The Emma who had left Tokyo in March was dead. She had died in a surgical chair under a white blindfold. This Emma was someone new, someone without certainty, someone learning to ask questions instead of accepting answers. But she made a choice. She would use what she had learned. She would become a nurse. She would help rebuild. She would teach her children when she had them the truth about mercy and humanity and the blindfold that changed everything. Emma married in 1949, an arranged marriage to a quiet shopkeeper. A good man. They had 3 children, 2 daughters, 1 son. Emma worked as a nurse in a local clinic treating the poor who could not afford proper medical care. She never spoke publicly about Fort Stanton. When asked about the war, she said, "Only I was captured. I survived. Nothing more." But privately to her children, when they were old enough, she told them everything. Her daughter asked once, "Were you ashamed to survive, Mother?" Emma thought carefully before answering. "I was ashamed at first, but I learned that shame was what they wanted us to feel. Shame kept us obedient. Shame made us willing to die rather than question. The Americans freed me from that shame. They showed me life has value, that individuals matter, that survival is not weakness, but strength. That was their greatest gift. Permission to value my own life." Every day for the rest of her life, Emma touched the corner of her right eye, the one Dr. Harrison had saved. She could see perfectly from that eye. Without him, she would have been blind. Every time she looked at the world clearly, she remembered the debt she owed to an enemy who had chosen humanity over hatred. In 1985, Emma attended the Himayuri Memorial, 40 years after the war. She saw Tomoko there, one of the 17 who had survived. 2 old women in their 60s now. They hugged and cried. "I became a nurse," Tomoko said. "Wanted to give the care we received." Emma smiled through tears. "I did the same." "I still remember Dr. Harrison's hands, how steady they were." "I remember the taste of cornbread," Emma said. "Is that strange?" "After all this, I remember cornbread." They laughed together, understanding that no one else could share. In 2008, Sophie returned to Japan for the first time in 60 years. Her husband David had passed away. She came to visit Emma, to see Catherine. 3 survivors of the 17. 3 old women in a Tokyo cafe, drinking coffee, remembering. "We are alive," Sophie said, "after everything." Catherine smiled. "We were enemies who became friends with enemies who saved us." "They did not save us," Emma said. "They showed us how to save ourselves, by choosing life over ideology, truth over propaganda, humanity over hatred." Emma passed away in 2010 at the age of 84. Her granddaughter Yuki gave the eulogy. "My grandmother taught me that enemies are not demons, that survival is courage, that life is a gift." She carried the lesson of the blindfold her entire life. Expected death, received healing. Expected hatred, received humanity. Expected propaganda, received truth. She taught us to see clearly, to question, to choose humanity. That is her legacy. The blindfold was supposed to be the last thing Emma saw before execution. Instead, it became the first moment of her true education. It taught her to see without eyes, to trust without certainty, to question without fear, to survive without shame, to value life over ideology, to choose humanity over hatred. That lesson, carried across 84 years and 3 generations, remains as relevant today as it was in 1945. The most powerful weapon is not the atomic bomb, not military might. The most powerful weapon is the choice to see the person in front of you as human, to extend mercy when you could choose cruelty, to heal when you could harm, to offer dignity when you could offer shame. That was the lesson of the blindfold. That was the gift Fort Stanton gave to 17 Japanese women in 1945. The white cloth that once meant execution became a symbol of transformation. Every day, we face moments when we can choose to see others as human or as enemy, to extend mercy or withhold it, to build bridges or walls. Emma chose trust. Emma chose humanity. Emma chose to see clearly. We can all choose that. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Tell someone about the blindfold, about Emma, about the cowboy code and American values that meant something real. Subscribe so these stories are never forgotten. Because in forgetting it, we lose the lesson. And in losing the lesson, we risk repeating the hatred. But in remembering and sharing and choosing as Emma chose, we keep the flame alive. The flame of humanity, the light that survives even in the darkest times. May Emma's blindfold teach us all to see.